So we're going to begin today I would like to reflect on two things today, besides some interesting lessons about the Parsha and about Slichos, as we approach the Motzei Shabbos Slichos, but also of the events of this past week. Now, when we learned last, it was pre-Beeperim, right? It was before the whole situation with the beepers, right? That went off in Lebanon. And the subsequent attacks on Wednesday. And then the subsequent taking out of the top leadership of Hezbollah, who were actively planning October 7th on steroids, which would have been to take over the Galilee, as it says in the final Mishnah, Sota, V'hagalil yecherav. But it doesn't mean that it will be destroyed necessarily. Yecherav means it will become cherev, it will become a war zone. Okay, that's my generous interpretation of it. And therefore, yes, of course it's a war zone. We know it's a war zone. It's been a war zone since October 7th, but that doesn't mean that it will chas v'shalom be destroyed and that people will not be able to return their homes. So we have to dedicate our shir especially to everything and everyone who has suffered, specifically in the north, and that they should speedily return to their homes. So, an observation. 2 points. One, what reaction would be the appropriate reaction to hearing of some of our deepest and most determined and evil enemies that we have faced perhaps probably since the Holocaust? And I say that probably, but because I'm sure there's plenty others that we maybe not even aware of. But and when they fell in such a humiliating fashion, and gruesome, because these beepers went off in their pockets, in front of their faces, near their private parts, near their arms and fingers. And I did see in a video where there was a yeshiva that was dancing. I didn't see anybody out handing out candy, as our cousins, the Arabs, tend to do. But it did trigger the question to me. I was riveted. I wanted to know every detail. I was amazed at how it seemed to be, I'll get to a second, very similar to some of the Makos in Mitzrayim. And I'm going to explain why. But first, let's just deal with the whole concept of celebrating our enemy's demise. We know Pasuk in Mishlei that's became the slogan of Shmuel HaKatan in Pirkei Avos. Binfol oyivcha al tismach libecha. When your enemy falls, don't be joyous, right? Ubekashlo, and when he stumbles, al yalgel libecha. Don't let your heart rejoice. Pen yira Hashem v'rabeinav. Maybe Hashem will get angry at you for doing that, right? V'heishiv me'alav apo, and he'll stop his anger at your enemy, and who knows, chas v'shalom, might divert it towards you. Now, on the other hand, so it seems from that pasuk clearly that we never should rejoice in the downfall of our enemies. Similarly, we don't say full hallel for the Chalamoid and the last day of Pesach, because we say, the Medrash tells us, Ma'aseh yadai tovim bayam ba'atem omrim shira. My human beings, my Egyptians are drowning, as wicked as they were, as guilty as they were, as wretched as they were, as abusive as they were to Klal Yisrael. And the Medrash says that each Mitzri got what they deserved. The worst got a more slow and painful drowning, and those who were a little less evil got a more merciful death. So we know that the people in the Yam Suf weren't great tzaddikim, and they certainly tormented Klal Yisrael. And yet Hashem castigates the heavenly host. The heavenly host wanted to sing a Shirat Hashem because it was a downfall of the enemies of Hashem and Klal Yisrael. And Hashem said no. And for that reason, we don't say a full Hallel on Shvi Pesach, and in deference to the last day of Pesach, not saying Hallel, we don't say it all of Chalamoy. That's one of the reasons given for the half Hallel. There is another reason, which is that there's no unique karbanos that are added, unlike Sukkot, which there's a different carbon every single day. Pesach is flatlined; it's the same karbanos every single day. So since there's no unique carbon past the first day, we don't say full Hallel. We're in deference to the Kedushas Hayom, but that is a very long and erudite discussion that we don't have to go into. But clearly the point is made that we should not rejoice. On the other hand, Klal Yisrael did rejoice. They sang Shira, the Shira, and guess what? We sing that Shira every single day. So how could you tell me it's wrong to do that? We do it every day, every single day. Doesn't matter. Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, in Shachris, in Sukkot de Zimra, Az Yashir Moshe. Right? So how in the world can you reconcile the fact that we celebrate with Shiras and Tishbachos every single day of the calendar year without exception? Without exception. And then, but you told me, play it down. It's not really a time to say, but we say half Hallel on Pesach. That's two contradictory things. On the same day of Chol Hamoed, that you're going to recite half Hallel, you're going to say, Psuka de Zimra, Az Yashir, the full Az Yashir. So how could that make any sense? What's the intention here of Chazal? Okay, frame it that way for you as clearly as I can possibly frame the question. If you have a comment, you may do so. Please feel free to. Oh, I don't hear.
I want to ask a question about Shira.
Please.
I thought Shira was only sung when something major was changing in our klal, in our life. Coming out of Mitzrayim, we see a whole different chapter, a whole different parsha for us. So we sing Shira. Hallel is something like coming from our hearts, praising Hashem for saving us and doing wonderful things for us, which is not that different, but it is different.
Okay, so you're saying that there's something different between a Hallel and Shira, right? Which obviously there is. I agree with you, because otherwise we wouldn't have the halacha play out in that manner. It can't be that Hallel is counterindicated and Shira is indicated, is to be embraced. Okay, so we have to get a little deeper. In which way can we sing praises of the downfall of the enemies, and which way shall we not? After all, if you look in the Shira itself, can you quote a pasuk which speaks to the fact that we're rejoicing in the downfalls of the enemy? Such surach vo rama bayam, and all that stuff. And that they fell into the deepest depths. I mean, we go into detail. We go into detail of their, horrific death. So then, what's going on? Okay, what a Chazal, and what is the wisdom? What's the Chachmas HaTorah here? And I'll go a step further. Okay. That on the Seder night, we say, Shvoch chamascha lagoyim asher lo yaducha, ki achlus Yaacov esnaveo hishamu, meaning those that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, which Eliyahu Navi, who is entering at that time of the Seder, we open the door for Eliyahu. At the same time, we decry all of our historical tormentors, and we understand that this should come to an end, okay? And we ask Hashem to mete out judgment on our enemies. Shvoch chamascha alagoyim. So now the question becomes even more complicated. Okay, Hashem did it. We either rejoice by saying Shira, we keep it muted by saying half Hallel, but to ask Hashem to destroy our enemies, that we didn't hear yet. That we didn't hear. We didn't pray to God that our enemies be destroyed, and in such a wrathful way. So how do we understand this? These are simple things that every one of us knows, but if we look at them in context, it'd be hard pressed to come up with a simple explanation. We need something that we'll go into a little bit more depth. At least I hope so. So how do we deal with that? So a couple of thoughts. Number one is that we have to look at the psukim themselves and be very careful. What does it say in Mishlei? It says, Binfol oyivcha. It's a very funny way of pronouncing it, but it is spelled out. That is the correct pronunciation. Not oivecha, but oyivcha. And it's very much on the singular. It emphasizes the singular. Because oivecha could necessarily mean the oivim of multiple people, right? Multiple people. Am Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, Hashem, Kaviyachol. No, oyivcha means a personal enemy. He may to me be an enemy, a rival, a threat, but to somebody else, he's just a regular guy. There's Kamsa and there's Bar Kamsa. There's people who don't, who have a personal vendetta, who thinks horrible things have been done, and they're not ready to forgive this person, and they consider them an oyev, or another guy down the street doesn't know the difference between him and anybody else. So that's the wisdom of Mishlei. You have a personal enemy, Al tismach. Simcha means the type of joy that's all out, right? Sameach chasam v'kal, simchas yomtiv. That's high level. It's not a chuckle. It's not a smile. It's delirious dancing and song, like a chasana, right? Don't go crazy here. All right, you want to smile? Okay, that's one thing. But don't go delirious when your personal enemy he had it coming, and he was this and that, and he did this to me. And no, Hashem doesn't like that. Hashem says, listen, buddy, I chose to do this judgment on your personal enemy. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you. Maybe it's part of maybe it was part of my decision, what the wrongs that were done to you, or the dangers that he exposed you or she exposed you to, or the wrongs that were done to you by this person. That was part of the divine plan, perhaps. We're not even sure. But you, just remember, people who live in glass houses should not throw rocks. Who says you're a tzaddik? They have this statement in called tzaddik in pelts. It's sarcastic. We know what that means. What does tzaddik in pelts mean? A tzaddik in a really expensive fur coat. You can go on and say what a tzaddik you are and how you deprive yourself day and night to learn Torah and to daven and to do gemilas chasadim. But in the meantime, you're driving a Lexus or you're driving a Rolls Royce. No. That's called tzaddik in pelts. Maybe you're not, free of above criticism. So we say to such a person, Al tismach, don't carry on here. And even al yageli becha, you're going to keep it to yourself. Don't go around dancing and skipping to yourself, even. Right? Even to yourself. Right? Penir Hashem v'yerabeinu. Hashem will be angry at you and say, what? You think you're so much better than this guy? Who says so? Let's open up your tick and take a look in Shemayim and see how you're doing. No. No way. Just keep it quiet. But that's when it's a personal enemy. Okay. What if it's an enemy of Klal Yisrael or an enemy of Hashem? Now, Klal Yisrael at the Yam Suf faced a collective enemy. Paro didn't just come after one Jew. He didn't even come after Moshe. He probably didn't even care about Moshe that much. He just wanted the slaves back. What have we done to give up this free and powerful and brilliant and talented workforce called Am Yisrael? So when Paro hikriv, Paro comes close, it means the collective Paro, the whole Mitzrayim, lock, stock, and barrel, its spiritual forces, its Saro Shal Mitzrayim, the koach of Egypt in the world. It's powerful. And it wants Klal Yisrael back. So when Klal Yisrael have been tormented by these people, working us literally to the bone and even at times to the death, especially of young children and so on, and they're disposed of by Hashem, and they had skin in the game. What do I mean by skin in the game? Skin in the game means we all, Klal Yisrael was Was it riskier? I'm a member of Klal Yisrael, and Klal Yisrael was in wretched danger. In such a case, they're certainly entitled to say Shira because their life was saved. You say about life-changing experience. The best life-changing experience is not to die. That's the best. That's the top life experience, is not to be killed. It doesn't matter if you had a good day or not. You went to the amusement park, you got ice cream. It don't matter. You're alive. You're alive. You survived. That evokes Shira because it's an immediate reaction to a sudden, incredible Yeshua. Klal Yisrael, guess what? Always is a constant. If Klal Yisrael was saved in Mitzrayim, that means we're getting saved every single day. Chayav Adam liros etz atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa Mitzrayim. Each and every day by saying the Shira, we reconnect to the Wi-Fi of Shchinas, of the Shechina, and to the collective soul of the Jewish people, known as Knesset Yisrael, which hooks up anytime you hook into a Shechina, whether it's one person learning alone, or two people with Chavrusa, or three people in a Din Torah, or 5 people in an organization, or 10 people in a minyan. It doesn't really matter. You log on to the Kedusha and the inspirational reality and life-saving and intervening koach of Hashem and His Shechina. So therefore, you're entitled to say Shira every single day because you were part of that collective experience of Klal Yisrael. And if they were saved on that day, if they weren't saved on that day, guess what? There would be no Klal Yisrael. So I can say, thanks God, I'm here today because you did this wonderful miracle so many years ago. So it makes more sense, a little bit more sense, to say, don't cancel Shira ever. The Jewish people deserve and are obligated to say Shira every single day. And in certain times, more than others. There's a special, like if a new miracle occurs, a new life-saving miracle occurs, then we also would be obligated. But when a life-saving miracle happens to the whole Jewish people, then the entire Jewish people need to say Shira, not just an individual whose life was saved or a group. But now let's turn our question to this, what Hashem's told the Malachim. Why did he castigate the Malachim? For wanting to sing and rejoice at the salvation of Klal Yisrael. So Hashem said to the Malachim, listen, you're not mortal, right? You don't have any life-saving experiences. I created you, and you'll be alive if I want to for eternity. And why wouldn't you be? He says, you're coming in to celebrate the fact that a human being and a group of people called Klal Yisrael were saved. Just know the truth. Elu ovdei avodah zara, ve'elu ovdei avodah zara. There was not that much difference between the average Jew at that time and the average Mitzri, believe it or not, at least in terms of idolatry. I'm not saying in terms of horrible deeds, but just in terms of the hashkafa or the emuna in avodah zara. Unfortunately, there was not a big difference. That's how they were raised. That's what they understood to be true. Moshe Rabbeinu was the first one that ever came around, other than the Levium, who tried to tell them otherwise. And therefore, Malachim have no right to rejoice on those moments. They're not Klal Yisrael. So Hashem was basically saying to them, you're not Klal Yisrael. You have no right to say Shira. They have a right to say Shira, but you don't. Okay? So why do we reduce our Hallel? Why do we reduce our Hallel? Because in deference to the fact that we weren't so when we went through the Yam Suf. We went to the Yam Suf, the Torah tells us. There's 2 psukim like that. One is spelled with a vav, choma, wall. One is spelled without a vav, chema, anger. There were people who were katani amana, weren't really associated with Hashem, didn't have a fully developed emunah in Hashem and a relationship with Hashem, weren't talking to Hashem, weren't involved with Hashem in their life. And they had a hard time. And then there were the other Jews who were, I imagine, all the Levium and so on, who were, and many more that they were fully attached to Hashem, and they went through this, and they saw it as the most beautiful, incredibly miraculous experience. And for them, the water was a strong foundation, and there was no fear, and there was no anxiety. There was only the sense of an incredible gift and relief. Okay. Now, I'll just parenthetically mention that that's the way Hashem wants us. He doesn't want us to live fearing our very lives day to day. He doesn't want us eating our hearts out over money or health issues or children issues, bani chaim zoning, and aggravating ourselves day and night about the plight, even of the Jewish people. It's not really what Hashem wants. Hashem wants you to view him as a Abba Harachaman, right? Avinu Av Harachaman, Rachem Aleinu. That's our relationship to Hashem, as a child to a father. No, sometimes a child will be disciplined by a father. That's true. But even if a child is disciplined by their father, there's no question about the love of the father for the son, even if it's a harsh discipline, a lesson that needs to be learned, because he knows it's for his own good, for his own future success, and for his own moral development. So therefore, we kind of perhaps bow our heads to the fact, Masa Yadai Tovim Bayam, and you know what? We kind of deserve to be with them, but out of the great mercy of Hashem, we weren't. Echoing the words of Mishlei, Binfol Ayivcha al Tisma, Ubekashla al Yiral Levavecha. So yes, we have to thank and praise Hashem and sing the fact that our lives were saved. That's a Shira reaction, right? But a Hallel reaction is a different sort of thing. Hallel means, Rananu tzadikim barunai, b'yisharim navatila. It has a little bit of a thing of, his chosen people were saved, his sacred ones, his beloved ones. And guess what? We had a lot of warts and a lot of blemishes at that time. We weren't that, gorgeous a bride just yet. So cool the Hallel drop. I'm not saying not to say it, but with humility. So that's how I would like to suggest we reconcile those psukim. Now, how does all this apply to the Bipurim? Well, the Bipurim were, let's take a look at a few things of that phenomenon that occurred to me. We say that Hein ga'alti eschem achris keracious. We say that in the Kedusha, right? Hein ga'alti eschem achris keracious. What does that mean? I'm going to redeem you the way I redeemed you before. Achris keracious. The previous time, like the last time. The last time will be like the first time. Which means that Geulas Mitzrayim is the pattern and precedent for Geulas HaMashiach. Okay, it's got to follow a pattern. It's not like we haven't been mapped out. Really organized people, they map out everything meticulously. Right? Hashem is ultra organized. Ultra. I mean, you're not going to be more organized than Hashem. I mean, it's just not happening. Hashem set the pattern. He gave a reshimo. He gave a quick flash to create a reality and a memory that we would then fill in later. That's really the way to understand how Mitzrayim worked. It was like a lightning flash of a vision. And now go ahead and start step by step to climb that great mountain, literally. So the great mountain approacheth. Okay, and that means that we should find, if we look, maybe not even that closely, parallels to the Yetziat Mitzrayim, and particularly to the Makos. Eser Makos, Hevi Akash Baruch Hu Mitzrayim, says Pirkei Avos, Mishnah Pirkei Avos, Parakeh, right? V'asara al Hayam, and 10 on the Yam Suf. There were multiple miracles all over the place. Just look at our Haggadah, hundreds and hundreds of miracles. No, are there not hundreds and hundreds of miracles that have gone on recently? Can you name even some of them? And let's go also into the pratim. I could name you several miracles But within the miracles, there were miracles. And that's what the Mitzrayim experience was. We were overwhelmed. Makkah wasn't just a one and out. Look at the Haggadah, 250, 300. It was 50 instead of 10. It was incredibly layered, nuanced, and expanded. Why? So that we would take a look at it and appreciate the incredible power of Hashem's judgment and also experience his incredible love for the Jewish people. So just throw out a couple of miracles that have happened only, I would say, I know last couple of months, last couple of days. Go ahead.
What about all of the tons of weaponry that Iran threw at us and not one single Jewish person was killed?
Yeah, that happened not once. It happened once through Iran, right? And once by Nasrallah, right? So if you remember, that was in response to an earlier attack, and we have to write down all the miracles where they had done away with one of the big Hezbollah nicks. What triggered that one? Who knows? You have to go back and look at all the timeline. It's a massive timeline. So there were two times that was done, one by Iran and one by Hezbollah. And the only major losses that we suffered, I'm not talking about fear and anxiety and so on, but there were, in the first attack, not even a chicken coop was destroyed. That's what the Arabs were saying, or laughing at Iran. They were laughing. They were mocking. Hashem was, Es asher hisalalti b'Mitzrayim. Hashem is mocking his enemies and Klal Yisrael's enemies, playing games with them. You didn't even kill a chicken coop. And the Arabs on Arab media are laughing at them. They couldn't even kill a chicken. Now, the next attack by Hezbollah actually did kill chickens. And then they were sending around on the mass media, Hezbollah fried chicken. And they had a big picture of him, the Colonel Sanders Hezbollah. Wow, you killed a couple of chickens. Yay. Now, in this most recent attack by Hezbollah, after the beepers, after the walkie-talkies exploding, taking out their top echelons of leaders, including a man that's wanted by America for $7 million since 1983.
Oh.
That's 40 years. He was like a kid when that happened. He's an old cocker now. But 300, what am I talking about? 300 Americans, 300. And now he finally got him with a bomb that came after the beepers, after the walkie-talkies, and then a big bomb as they sat in the bottom of a residential building in Beirut, no less. It wasn't over the border in Bint Jabil, that cursed place where we suffered so much in 2006. It was in a building. And who was with him? The top commanders of Hezbollah, number 2, number 3, plus all other sorts of rogues gallery of upper echelon terrorists and Iranians. Boom. What were they planning? They were planning the October 7th on steroids, which was to take over the Galilee, Khurban, as I mentioned earlier. And boom, they were vaporized. Now, within all these miracles, with one after one after one. So this time, Hezbollah responded, and they killed 15 cows. Now, I received a text saying that the State Department of the United States considered that a major escalation. In other words, to move from no chickens to chickens, and now 15 cows, cautioned Hezbollah restraint that they should not escalate their war with Israel. And now they're going to call him, like barbecue Marsala or Benny's barbecue or something like that. Spare rib, Sulam, whatever his name is, Nasrallah with barbecue sauce. A galechter. I mean, poor cows. I'm not rejoicing in the death of a cow, chas v'shalom. But better a cow than a Jew. Maybe they were Gilgulim of Jews and they were, dying al Kiddush Hashem. Could very well be. I wouldn't be surprised at all. So es asher hisalalti b'Mitzrayim. Now let's look at the beepers for a second. If you want to compare the beeper thing to any one of the Makos, and there's been lots of barad, right? Lots of barad, things falling from the sky and burning, right? There's been lots of dam. So I thought, it occurred to me that if there was one makkah that the beepers would remind us of, would be the following. Number one, we know that the Tzfardeya went into their innards. We know that it destroyed their ability to reproduce children. We know that it went into their bathrooms, into their bedchambers. Okay? We know that it made noises. What makkah am I describing? Tzfardeya. Now, the word Tzfardeya is also Tzavardeya, because the pei and the beis are pretty interchangeable, means gathering intelligence. And that's what these things were for. But also importantly, the intelligence gathering services, some people say worked for 15 years on it. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I mean, maybe it's true. I don't know. I think they saw an opportunity and they seized it. I don't know. But in any case, no one knows how it happened. They put in explosives. They didn't put in explosives. They let out a pulse. They didn't let out a pulse. The batteries exploded, but maybe they didn't explode so much. They exploded a little, but not so much. And then they detonated the explosive, but it was not too much explosives because it would have hurt people. And you see an individual person being stricken while everybody else was a picture of him, a guy in a food market, right? His beeper goes off and he drops to the floor. Not one apple moved off the stand. He didn't knock over even one peach or one pear. He just dropped to the ground alone. And everybody's standing around looking around. What's going on around here? That's a divine justice. That's, to me, as targeted as Makos Bechoros. He chose the guys that deserve to die and whacked them. Nobody else. You are a Bechor. You know what they say, Bechir in modern Hebrew means he's a Bechir. He's like an elite person. These were elite terrorists. They were Bechirim. Well, those Bechirim got Makas Bechirim. And yeah, so I can't help but looking at it and saying how Hashem is mocking our enemies. And I've always shared with you, and I will share it again, what my holy mashgiach, Rabbi Wolfson, said in 1980 something, around 1984 or 5 or 6 or 8, when I was with him in yeshiva. And he said, Iran is bechinas Haman Nofel. They're falling. One after the other, falling. The beeper goes off, they fall down. The walkie-talkie goes off, they fall down. They showed a guy dangling a walkie-talkie in front of his friend, an Arab, and the guy went crazy and jumped and ran out of the house. And then they started laughing. They realized they were punking each other. They were, but the guy dangled a walkie-talkie. But guys, they're bepachad. This is the mehuma and pachad that Hashem talks about that we couldn't even imagine. These guys are petrified that if Hezbollah gives them something, it's going to blow up. They can't trust it. They were not going to keep it in their pockets. Would you? And therefore, we can see many, many things. Yes, there's terrible suffering. Yes, there's horrible injustice. Yes, there's incredible, incredible failures that we have experienced and the loss of an incredibly precious, immense group of people. At the same time, we have to recognize the Chaste Hashem and that he seems to be taking cheshbon with his enemies. And how levai viter, bechinas Haman Nofel. They have their hearts hardened now. Remarkable thing. You would think Nasrallah would stop. He says, no, we're going to keep fighting. Good. Let us keep fighting. And the reaction of the world has actually been shocking. The American State Department official who unceasingly and despicably despises Israel and uses every opportunity, every time he speaks, to disparage them. He thanked Israel for taking out this guy Ukal. Ukal is like a when somebody grabs control of your bank account, it's like a bad thing. This guy's name was Ekul, or whatever his name was, and they say, "Oh, thanks. He's worth $7 million reward. I appreciate it that you took out this guy. He deserved to die." What? What about that we bombed innocent children? Oy, oy, oy. Oy, 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 these innocent children. And no, that didn't come out of his mouth. And that's another sign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually, if we can hold on with our emunah, and we show strength and faith and unity, the world will catch on. And I'll just conclude with this. An incredible shvach of Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael got a tremendous compliment. What was the compliment? So the commentators in the Arab world said, why did Gaza attack? Why is all this going on now? Because they were convinced that Israeli society was so fractured and so much baseless hatred, so much sinas going on. With all of the media, they said this group, if we just pressure it, will disintegrate. And they really believe that. And they're right for believing it, because that's how the rest of the world would react. That's how they would react. That's how they have reacted. They're loosely held together. And when they go at each other and other people attack, boom. So they thought the same thing would happen to the Jews. And they were shocked to find out that that's not what a Jew does. They were shocked to find out that Jews don't fall apart. But even under the worst circumstances, and the most unfair circumstances, they can get together, and when they do, they're incredibly powerful. And that Hashem is on our side. So what they complained about in the Arab media says, these were false articles. You see, this was espionage. Haaretz newspaper, you wrote these articles to convince us that Israel was defeatable, and that was terrorism on the part. Thank you, Haaretz. You see how Hashem uses even the most backwards, inside-out connections with no intent for his purposes. Hashem used Haaretz and all those people who, whatever they said, to convince the Arabs that now is the time to attack, just so that they could be destroyed. Thank you, Haaretz. Thank you. Now I'll buy our prescription. Since the Arabs think that you fooled them, and the fiesta resistance of all this is that some people are suggesting that the helicopter that carried Iran's president, what was his name again? Halimi. What was his name again? I forget. Hania. There was a beeper on board that went off. You see how paranoid and crazy they are? The truth is, it was the weather. But now it's so inside their head that it was a beeper. As if the other beepers wouldn't have all gone off simultaneously. I don't know. It was a beeper. They're afraid. And that's the pachad that grips our enemies when it's time for us, a small nation, to get rid of a large. B'sheva drachim, it says, they'll run 7 ways, and they're running away, and they're saying, the beepers, help. This is Asher, hisolalti b'mitzrayim. V'hayotzi mikol zeh, is that I do think it would have been proper to sing when the beepers went off, but you'd have to sing this song. Utsu eitzaveh, too far. They were planning a terrible thing. Dabru davar velo yakum. It would not happen. Utsu eitzaveh, too far. Dabru davar velo yakum. Ki imanu kel. Have a great rest of the week. Be well.
Yiboneh, 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 Shama, Shir Shir Chadash